Hi, welcome back to Two Minds Unfiltered.
And today we're going to talk about the Lizzie Borden case.
This case is surrounded by horror and the paranormal. It's so exciting. I
This is
can't wait to
why I
talk
fell
about
in
it.
love with it, yeah.
Yes.
Because I fell in love with the paranormal side of the story until I learned that it was an actual murder story.
So, viewer discretion advised. This one is quite graphic with the nature of the crime and what we will be discussing today. As you know, obviously, most things on our channel are crime related. So watch at your will. But we won't go into too much detail, but it is still something we want to put out there.
Yeah, this one might give you a little bit of a fright.
Shall we get started? So, Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th of 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts. She was born to Sarah Anthony Borden and Andrew Jackson Borden. Her father was an English and Welsh descendant, and he grew up in a very modest surrounding and struggled financially as a young man. Andrew eventually prospered in the manufacture and sale of furniture and caskets.
Ironic.
Right?
Sorry.
Do you think he made his own casket?
He probably picked one out that he liked.
Yeah, he's probably like, that's a good casket.
He's like, I'm going to want a nice dark oak wood for my casket.
With like a nice red velvet interior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Probably. And then became a successful property developer. He was the director of several textile mills and owned considerable commercial property. He was also the president of the Union Savings Bank and a director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. At the time of his murder, his estate was valued at around $300,000 or $10 million in 2024.
Yeah, so like today's type of wealth.
Yes.
So a lot of money.
That's
But,
crazy.
I mean, despite his wealth, he was known for his frugality. I mean, for instance, the Borden residence lacked indoor plumbing, even though it was a common feature for the wealthy at that time. So, like, they didn't have toilets, they had chamber pots still, which was rarely seen at that time of age anymore. The house stood in an affluent area, Jesus. But the wealthiest residents of Fall River, including Andrew's cousins, generally lived in the more fashionable neighborhood, the Hill, which was farther from the industrial areas of the city. So he didn't even live in like the wealthiest part of town.
No. So Lizzie and her older sister Emma Lenora Borden had a relatively religious upbringing and attended Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, Lizzie was very involved in church activities, including teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants in the United States. She was also involved in religious organizations such as Christian Endeavor Society, for which she served as secretary-treasurer, and contemporary social movements such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. She was also a member of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission, which I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I would assume that it's like some evangelical kind of thing, like a mission.
So 3 years after the death of Lizzie's mother, which she died of, what was it?
So Lizzie's biological mother was
Yes.
Sarah Anthony Morse Borden, and she died in 1863 at the age of 39. And she died from uterine congestion and spinal disease.
And I believe she died when they were quite young. I
Yeah.
know Emma was older and Lizzie was quite young, so she didn't really remember her mother too much. But shortly after, Andrew, their father, married Abby Durfee Gray. Lizzie later stated that she called her stepmother Mrs. Borden, or what else did she call her? Pig?
I think so.
And demurred on whether they had a cordial relationship. She believed that Abby had married her father for his wealth because she came from not a wealthy family. She called her like a gold digger, essentially.
Yeah.
And then Bridget Sullivan, who they called Maggie, was the Borden's 25-year-old live-in maid who had immigrated to the U.S. from Ireland. Sorry. There you go.
So Bridget, obviously it was her name. They called her Maggie because they didn't bother to learn her name.
Nope.
And they had a prior maid that was named Maggie at some point in their life. So
so they just kept the name.
Yeah, it was just easier for them to not know who Bridget was and just call her Maggie.
But she testified that Lizzie and Emma rarely ate meals with their parents. So, like, I think it was like they never sat down for like one meal, all of them together. She would refuse to eat in the vicinity of Abby.
Yeah.
But it did say that like Abby was a pretty nice woman. She didn't ever cause any problems. I think she wanted a relationship with the girls. She was pretty demure, pretty quiet. She was maybe a little strict, but at the same time, like, she didn't hit them. At least that's from like what records have stated. Obviously, I didn't live with them. I didn't know them personally.
Right.
I don't know. But they always say that like she was a pretty sweet woman, and so, and like I get why you'd be upset about someone replacing your actual mother, but like,
But she never tried to replace her.
no,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that Lizzie just had that feeling of like, I didn't know my mom and you stepped in and took her place. And she felt a lot of resentment against that.
Yeah, especially with the money reason, which we'll get into that later because that's a huge thing.
Yes.
In May 1892, Andrew killed multiple pigeons in his barn with a hatchet, believing they were attracting local children to hunt them. But Lizzie kind of grew an attachment with these said pigeons.
Yeah. She was a very like animal oriented person. She didn't really like people, but she really liked these pigeons, and I guess they had like a pigeon thing on their property.
Yeah.
And so they were just there. So she built them a roost, and kind of fed them and took care of them. So she was very upset and like hurt that her father would go out there and hack up these pigeons.
Yeah, with not even a second thought.
Yeah, and she witnessed him doing this, and so it just really rubbed her the wrong way.
Yeah.
And that was one of 6 hatchets that the family had on their property.
Yeah.
Why they had 6 hatchets, I don't know.
I don't know.
But yes, I think that was the one out at like their barn or something like that.
Yeah.
One of the things was like he didn't do nice things for the girls. I mean, they lived in a decent house, like it was a nice house, but again, like we said before, they didn't have the modern amenities of the time. They didn't have running water, electricity, things like that. But he would buy Abby, nice gifts, and he did things for her that he wouldn't necessarily do for his own daughters. Yeah. And so they felt that resentment as well. And the tensions within their house had been growing for months before the murder. And Andrew had actually gifted real estate to Abby's family.
Yeah.
Which really irked the girls.
And not even just that, but what really ticked him off was that the house that they were currently residing in, he put it into Abby's name.
Yeah, exactly. So, motive.
Right?
And after their stepmother's sister received a house, the sisters demanded and received a rental property, which actually they bought that house from their dad for $1, right? And then they couldn't take care of it. It was just too much. So weeks before the murder, they actually sold the property back to him for $5,000 or $170,993 in 2023's currency.
Yeah. They literally need like triple the money back.
Yeah.
After they just decided, they threw a tantrum and pretty much just said, it was too much work, we can't handle this. Because like he was kind of like, he knew his daughters, he must have. So he was like, fine, I'll give you this, right? Like, have fun. You're going to be a landlord now. You're doing all the work. And then as soon as they were off on their own, they're like, ugh, we can't do this. And he's kind of like, told you so. But then he also still got gypped by his own daughters. By having to...
It's just wild. But then actually the night before the murder, John Vinicum Morse, Lizzie and Emma's maternal uncle, visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with Andrew. Keep in mind, Andrew was kind of shady. Yeah. They both were kind of shady. He conducted his business in more of like a I want to collect as much money as I can.
A little bit more of a corrupted manner.
Yeah. And there was speculation around their conversation, particularly about property transfer, which was already a tense conversation when it came to the girls.
Yeah.
And so it may have aggravated. Oh my god.
Aggravated?
Shut up!
Sorry.
Aggravated a very tense situation already.
Well, yeah. Okay, so some context. All right, this house the walls were very thin. It was almost like a little maze upstairs.
Yeah.
So
we'll put a picture of the layout of the house. And
let's just say, okay, so Abby and Mr. Borden's bedroom, the master bedroom, they actually had a lock on their door. That was the only room in the house that had a lock on the door besides the front and the back door, I'm sure. Because previously in the past, Mr. Borden had someone came in and like robbed some of, I think it was like his jewelry or something like that,
like valuables.
Yeah, and so he would put a lock on his song, and he assumed that it was a family member because only certain people were allowed into his house, and so that already kind of raised suspicions because he was like, somebody in this house did it, and so he would put the key onto the fire mantle, and he'd be like, whoever did it, I dare you to come take the key. But their room was right near Lizzie and Emma's rooms. And when Emma got older and she went on a trip somewhere, I can't remember exactly where she went. When she got back, Lizzie demanded to have the bigger room because she just wanted it. She was kind of a brat, I'm not gonna lie. Lizzie was kind of a brat, I'm just gonna say. As a younger sibling, I can attest that we are brats sometimes, and she was definitely giving younger sibling syndrome. But that also means that her wall that's by her bed shares the same wall as her parents' room. And they would talk money in their room, and Lizzie was listening right at the, at the wall, and so she could hear everything. And so she literally heard them talking about the fact that, like, when all of this is done, if he ever passes away, all the deeds, all the money goes to her. And so they already had this planted in their mind that, like, this stepmom that they absolutely despised is going to get their entire livelihood instead of his own flesh and blood.
Yeah.
And they were pissed. Yes. Very pissed.
So, clear motive for, Lizzie wanting to do this.
They heard him, their father and their uncle talking, too.
Yeah, exactly.
I did not have a strong grip, my guy.
So, we are now moving into the murders. So, Thursday, August 4th, 1892. So, Morse arrived the evening of August 3rd and slept in the guest room that night.
Mm-hmm.
Which is ominous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of the fact that, like,
what happens in there.
Yeah.
So, after breakfast the next morning, Andrew and Morse went to the sitting room where they chatted for nearly an hour. Morse left around 8:48 a.m. to buy a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River. And he was planning to return to the Borden home for lunch at around noon.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew left for his morning walk around 9 a.m. This was pretty much daily. So
yeah, like literally I believe they left almost right around the same time. Mm-hmm. They both physically saw each other leaving.
Yes. So, although cleaning of the guest room was actually one of Lizzie and Emma's regular chores, Abby had gone upstairs sometime between 9 a.m. and about 10:30 to make the bed. And according to forensic investigation, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. She was first struck on the side of the head with a hatchet, which cut just above her ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor. So she was struck, and it hit her hard enough that she literally just spun on her toes and just... I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. I didn't time that right.
But, and then this also created contusions on her nose and forehead.
Mm-hmm.
Her killer then struck her multiple times, delivering 17 more direct hits to the back of her head, killing her.
Yes.
So one of the creepy things about this is, if you look at pictures, which we will not put any up, they are on Google, though, if you choose to look them up.
Literally the first thing that you see.
Yes. But, obviously it was, she was facing her killer and then fell. She was actually found to be partially like under the bed,
Yeah, the only part that got under the bed was, I believe, her
her
entire
arm.
arm.
Yeah, which suggests that she didn't die immediately.
Mm-mm.
Obviously,
Nope.
she's confused, in pain, and
Terrified.
she was trying to escape. Which obviously the killer was standing behind her when after she fell to the floor. So she can't go back that way. The only exit is under the bed. So she was literally trying to crawl for her life to get under the bed away from her killer, and she did not make it. Clearly, she
No.
got 17 whacks to the back of her head,
Yep.
which ultimately killed her. So freaky.
Yeah, just a little bit sad the fact that, like, literally as this was happening, she was probably whimpering, crying, doing whatever, and just like desperately trying to just at least try and get under the bed. And she didn't even make it like that much under the bed
No,
before. Because don't forget, as soon as she fell to the ground, she probably kicked into gear and went into fight or
probably.
flight mode. Probably was trying to crawl under there, and the person just kept whacking her with no hesitation, no pausing
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever. So she didn't even stand a chance. But the fact that she tried is what's really chilling
Yeah,
in my opinion.
for sure.
Um so basically though, around 10:30 Andrew returned to the house. But when he was trying to open the front door, his key failed. So he knocked, and Sylvan, who was the maid, who they called Maggie, and we'll probably refer to her as Maggie because that's just how she's commonly known.
Mm-hmm.
But she went to go try and unlock the door, finding it jammed, and she cursed the door. But this is where it gets a little creepy, and we'll put some timestamps earlier if you want to skip this part because it's a little
It is.
horrifying.
It's like out of a horror movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if that really freaks you out and you don't want to visualize that, we will put timestamps. Please feel free to skip this part. And the time will be about like here.
Yeah. So while she was trying to open the door, behind her, she heard some laughing.
So mind you, right, and I again will I'll have a picture up of the floor layout for the first, second, and third floors
Yeah.
of this house. So like this is like the front of the house. Here's like the main door. The stairs kind of come up like this and then make a right angle. There's a landing here. And then the guest bedroom is over here. And so there's like this like railing here, and I would assume it comes around there. So keep that in mind, right? There's a landing right at the top of the steps, and the stairs are right about behind the door.
Yeah, so you can, from the little railing and the little, I guess, catwalk almost area, you can see right down to where the front door is, the front foyer.
Yes.
Keep that in mind. So while she was trying to unlock the door, she testified that she heard breathing behind her, right? Already creepy. Like heavy breathing. Like someone like was just
Like,
exerting themselves.
yeah, exactly.
And she's heard quiet maniacal laughing. Almost like childlike laughing, you know? The creepy laugh that you hear in most horror movies.
Yeah.
And she heard someone pacing up the stairs. And now, mind you, she was facing the door still. So this was all happening behind her. She had no idea. Because she's thinking, like, who the heck is that behind me? And she basically said that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs, and she turned around and she saw Lizzie standing there, covered in blood, laughing, panting, smiling, and pretty much told her to shh, don't say anything, you know? I know you see me. And she was literally pacing back and forth on the top of the stairs. I just think the breathing part is freaking terrifying.
Yeah.
The fact that she's literally like about to open the knob, and all of a sudden you just hear behind you, and then you look and there's somebody standing there all bloody, and they just tell you to go shh, you know, don't say a word. Is terrifying, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But Lizzie later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked where Abby was, to which she replied that a messenger had delivered Abby a summons to visit a sick friend.
trying to create an alibi. So, essentially, it's said that she had about a 90-minute window to commit both crimes. Abby obviously had been killed first, and she was just left up in the guest room. She was dead for a while, and it just so that gave Lizzie time to clean up and get ready for her father to come home, and he actually arrived around 10:30,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Um, and there's different statements on this. Then Maggie stated that she had removed Andrew's slippers and helped him, or Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he laid down for a nap after his
Yeah,
walk.
Lizzie helped him, not
Yes.
Maggie. Just to clarify.
Um, but this isn't true. Because if you look at crime scene photos, and again, I won't put one up, but feel free to look, he is still wearing his boots.
Yep.
So I don't know where she thought she was getting on with that, but okay. So, she testified Maggie testified that she was in her third floor room, resting from cleaning windows when just before about 11:10 a.m. she heard Lizzie calling from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick, father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." So Lizzie was alone, obviously, in the downstairs area with her father at that time.
Yeah, they claimed that she was, or she claimed that she was in the kitchen or the dining room ironing, like what, silk something. She was ironing some sort of cloth
Yeah.
of some kind.
So she has no alibi, and
No.
actually, at some point, she said that she was outside of the house.
Yep.
And she heard like the thump and groaning and things like that, and you know why would you be able to hear that outside the house? I don't know. She said that she had left the house and gone out to the barn or something, and that's when someone entered the home and killed him. But Andrew was slumped on the couch in the downstairs sitting room, struck 10 to 11 times with like a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyes was split cleanly in two, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked.
Yep.
His still bleeding wounds suggested a very recent attack. The family doctor, Dr. Bowen, arrived from his home across the street and pronounced both victims dead. Detectives estimated that Andrew's death had occurred approximately around 11 a.m.
Yeah. So I want to give a little context before we get into the investigation because this is also another key moment. I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
So after she called down and said, "Maggie, come quick, father's dead. Someone came in and killed him." Well, one of them was apparently, freaking out, even though she was probably the one that did it. They immediately were like, kind of like, what do we do? Like, I believe Lizzie was like, "Maggie, get the doctor," across the street, and Lizzie went outside with her, and one of their neighbors,
Mrs. Churchill.
thank you, she noticed that Lizzie was kind of in distress, panicky, and she literally came out. She's like, "Dearie, what's wrong? Like, what happened?" And Lizzie was kind of like, "Someone murdered father, please come over, like blah blah blah." So she did, and when I think it was Maggie and Mrs. Churchill, when they came back into the house.
Who's Lizzie?
I know, but Maggie came back to the house after seeing the doctor, is what I mean.
Because she brought the doctor back over.
Yes. They at the time, Maggie only knew, supposedly, that Mr. Borden was dead, right? And since they're thinking this is a home invasion attack, they're thinking, is somebody still in the house? Right? Because they didn't check. They didn't think of this. And then they were questioning where Mrs. Borden might have been.
So the police were actually already at the property, and she answered the questions very contradictory, and she just didn't have a consistent story. So about 2 hours later, she told the police that she had heard nothing and entered the house, not realizing that anything was wrong. And when asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if someone could go upstairs and look for her.
Yeah.
So Maggie and the neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Churchill, were about halfway up the stairs, and
Yeah.
again, the stairs had that landing on it.
Yeah, and the railing that like so when you're going up the stairs, there was that railing where it's like had slats in between, so you could literally see through it. And as you're going up the stairs, about halfway through up before you get into like eye line with the floor from the next level, you could see like if you turn your head, you can see into the guest room if the door is open.
Yes.
So, this part freaked me out more than I think it freaked you out.
It did freak me out a little bit.
Halfway up the stairs, I don't know what prompted them to turn their head and look.
Well, I mean, you're going up the stairs, like, oh, well, it's natural to be looking around your
Yeah,
surroundings.
especially
So,
because they weren't sure if there was still the intruder inside, you
exactly.
know?
I mean, you're in a crime scene now. You
Yeah,
know, you have Mr. Borden downstairs. You're looking for Abby. You don't know if she's been attacked.
yeah.
So,
Well, as soon as they meet the eye line that they can see in, as they turn and look into the guest room, all they see is Abby laying face down, not moving.
with her arm, like, outstretched.
Yeah. So
So,
imagine how creepy that is. Just like turning around and from underneath the bed, just seeing somebody not moving, not knowing if they're dead. Pretty close, pretty clear call that they're probably dead because they're not moving, nothing.
yeah,
But just like absolutely like obliterated too. But I wonder what they, actually saw. And then
yeah,
them thinking, oh my gosh, is the person still in there? Are they behind
exactly.
another door? Creepy.
I think they
Creepy.
honestly, when they saw that, they went back downstairs.
Oh, immediately back
Yeah,
downstairs.
they didn't continue up. They
No, no,
just,
no.
then the, police would go up and investigate.
Yeah.
Mrs. Churchill, when uh, Lizzie had gone over to chat with her for a moment to tell her about, that her father was dead, um, she seemed very calm.
Mm-hmm.
She did not give off any signs of distress at all. It was already like off-putting, and the police also made that connection too, that they didn't like the way she acted. They didn't like her attitude or anything like that. So she seemed very put together for experiencing the slaying of her stepmother and her father. So
She was not checked for any bloodstains, but they said that I believe Maggie testified that she saw Lizzie in a different dress from when she first saw her, and they didn't find any blood anywhere, but they did find one garment that had a piece of blood on it, and then she just claimed that it was like her womanly time of month, and they backed off real quick.
yeah, I mean that was kind of like taboo
Yeah,
at the
so they're
time.
like, "Oh, yep, mm-hmm, sure. Sorry
Yeah,
about that." But they did search her room, but it was like a cursory inspection, so they really didn't like do a proper search.
they kind of like opened things and they were like, it's fine.
Yeah. But they were criticized for their lack of diligence. But at the same time, they they weren't really suspecting that maybe she had done it at this time because
No,
like back then women, how could they ever think of doing a heinous crime like this?
it was
So,
very rare. It was
mhm.
more male dominated in
Yeah,
criminal world. So in the basement, police found two hatchets, two axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. The hatchet head was suspected of being the murder weapon, as the break in the handle appeared to be fresh, and the ash and dust on the head, um, unlike the other bladed tools, appeared to have been deliberately applied to make it look as if it had been in the basement for a while, which, you know, you didn't do a very good job. Things that have been sitting clearly they look like they've been
Oh
sitting.
yeah, they have a different type of look to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but none of these tools were actually removed from the house, so they didn't collect them. They also, there had been like a mysterious illness going around the home, and they actually, I, it was because the family ate mutton, right, which is a type of meat that was just left out for like weeks,
Yeah.
just on the stove or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if he didn't have like plumbing and electricity, obviously they don't have like refrigeration and things like that. So
At
they
least
just
not good refrigeration.
maybe like an ice box or something.
Maybe,
But
but they clearly didn't use it.
no, because they just left meat out, so they were eating poison, like old expired meat.
Well, yeah,
And they were
because they,
tested for that.
well, yeah, because they wanted to see if it was the job of poison. But the thing is, like, how could it when they were literally stabbed to death? So clearly they weren't dead beforehand. But I digress.
But I mean, Abby was actually very like paranoid.
Yes, she was.
Prior to the murder, she was
Yeah.
paranoid that someone was poisoning the family, that someone was going to hurt
Well, yeah,
them in some
because
way because of Andrew's like business tactics.
yeah,
And
he
things.
had quite a bit of enemies only
Yeah.
because most of the people thought they were getting gypped by Andrew because he had so many properties and he was not a big like that he wasn't a big people pleaser in the whole business area of things. And so Abby was always concerned that they were going to be targeted and poisoned. So they kind of looked into that to make sure that they weren't poisoned because residents suspected Lizzie of purchasing hydrocyan. How do you pronounce that?
Or
They've tested.
hydrocyanic.
Thank you. Hydrocyanic acid in a diluted form from the local druggist. Her defense was that she inquired about using acid to clean her furs, despite the local medical examiner's testimony that it did not have antiseptic properties. She was also seen going to a different druggist, I believe, and she wanted some other chemical that was like pretty much poison. We'll put the name of that up. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Because she claimed that she wanted to clean her, I think like seal skin
Yeah.
coats or something like that. And the pharmacist, he literally like denied giving it to her,
Yeah.
and she threw a tantrum. And she's like, "Well, I've gotten it here before. Like, I've gotten it before, and it's never been a problem." He's like, "Well, I'm not them, so sorry,
Yeah.
but you're not getting it." She stormed out, mad as hell.
Yeah.
And then I think that's when she got the other one instead. So they were a little suspicious on her, the fact that she was buying poison not too long before the murders happened.
Exactly. Lizzie and Emma's friend Alice Russell had decided to stay with the sisters the night before the murder while Morse spent the night in the attic guest room. Contrary to later accounts that he slept in the murder site guest room. Police were stationed around the house the night of August 4th, during which an officer said that he had seen Lizzie enter the cellar with Russell, carrying a kerosene lamp and a slop pail. He stated he saw both women exit the cellar, after which Lizzie returned alone. Though he was unable to see what she was doing, he stated it appeared she was bent over the sink. So
Getting rid of the evidence.
Exactly, like washing out stuff like that, but like her dress and other things.
Yeah, maybe trying to get the blood off her dress, and when it didn't work, she burned it.
Yep. Yeah, because it says later on that she was planning on burning a dress.
On August 5th, Morse left the Borden residence and was mobbed by hundreds of people. Police had to actually escort him back in the house because this became a sensational case because they were a well-known family, and because they wanted to find out who did it, they were pointing fingers at Morse, they were pointing fingers at Lizzie. Literally everyone in the house was seen as a murderer. The following day, police conducted a more thorough search of the house, inspecting the sisters' clothing, confiscating the broken-handled hatchet head, and even that evening, a police officer and the mayor visited the house, and that was the first time Lizzie was ever informed she was a suspect in the murder. And they remember, you can actually, because you can go visit this house, by the way. This house is up for tours, and it's actually a bed and breakfast. You can stay in there. And you can actually go into the room that she got the verdict that she was a suspect.
Yes.
And they actually had to put her on drugs because that's when she started kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
So, her trial took place in New Bedford starting on June 5th, 1893. Her prosecuting attorneys were Hosea M. Knowlton and future United States Supreme Court Justice William H. Moody. Defending were Andrew V. Jennings, Melvin O. Adams, and former Massachusetts Governor George D. Robinson. 5 days before the trial's commencement on June 1st, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. This time, the victim was Bertha Manchester, who was found hacked to death in her kitchen. The similarities between the Manchester and Borden murders were striking and noted by jurors.
Jose Correa
Correa
de
de
Mello.
Mayo, a Portuguese immigrant, was later convicted of Manchester's murder in 1894 and was determined not to have been in the vicinity of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. So that was like immediately like disputed.
So, a prominent point of discussion in the trial and the press coverage of it was the hatchet head found in the basement, which was not convincingly demonstrated by the prosecution to be the murder weapon. The murder weapon was never found.
Yeah.
Just as a blanket
Yeah,
statement.
the axe was an alleged weapon.
Yes. Prosecutors argued that the killer had removed the handle because it would have been covered in blood. One officer testified that a hatchet handle was found near the hatchet head, but another officer contradicted this. Though no bloody clothing was found at the scene, Russell testified that on August 8, 1892, she had witnessed Lizzie burn a dress in the kitchen stove, saying it had been ruined when she brushed against wet paint. During the course of the trial, the defense never attempted to challenge this statement.
Yeah, because like when she stated earlier how she said she was out in the barn, I believe it's because they were repainting something in there. So there was wet paint apparently around the area. So
Yes.
to them it seemed pretty plausible.
Right. So Lizzie's presence at the home was also a point of dispute during the trial. According to testimony, Sullivan, or Maggie, had entered the second floor around 10:58 a.m. and left Lizzie and her father downstairs. Lizzie told several people at this time she went into the barn and was not in the house for 20 minutes or possibly half an hour. Hyman Lubinsky testified for the defense that he saw Lizzie leaving the barn around 11:03, and Charles Gardner confirmed the time. At 11:10 a.m., Lizzie called Maggie downstairs, told her Andrew had been murdered, and ordered her not to enter the room. Instead, Lizzie sent her to get a doctor, which was the family doctor that lived across the street.
So here's a little bit, because you're probably thinking, oh, okay, so they saw her leaving the barn at 11:03. You're right. Yes, maybe they had. But from 11:03 to around 11:10 a.m., that's 7-minute window.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could kill someone in a 7-minute window.
If you have enough reason to, yes.
Yeah. So that doesn't really dispute the fact, like, yeah, maybe she was at the barn. Maybe. But if,
But there's 7 minutes where she was not accounted for.
no. And if Abby was murdered, like, almost an hour and a half or so before before he even came home, then she still had time to then kill Abby, go to the barn, do what she had to do, because that might have been how she, got rid of the axe in there or something. I don't know. Whatever she was doing in there. And then she came in, saw that her father was home, and was like, oh crap, well, I also need to get rid of him. 7-minute window. Still perfect amount of time.
Yes.
Another thing I also thought was weird is that I think Maggie kind of knew about at least one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like when you said how she literally got hit, like Abby got hit in the head and then flumped down, that's dead body weight hitting the ground.
It's not like she tried to catch herself. Like, she literally just went down.
Yeah, so either you're upstairs or you're downstairs. I'm sorry, but there's no way you didn't at least hear some sort of thump.
Yeah.
Just saying. I'm just saying. So another thing they brought out kind of a surprise was that both victims' heads had been removed during the autopsy, which they actually went back and removed the heads.
Yes.
So when they previously were doing the autopsy, they left the heads attached, but they literally asked them to go back, reopen, like kind of, I don't know, did they
almost like exhume them, but they weren't buried.
Yeah, and take their heads off to bring them in so that they could see the amount of damage that was done to their skulls. The skulls were admitted as evidence during the trial and presented on June 5th. Upon seeing them in the courtroom, Lizzie fainted.
So the jury was sent to deliberate on June 20th, 1893. After about an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury acquitted Lizzie Borden of the murders. Upon exiting the courthouse, she told reporters she was the happiest woman in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I understand she was heavily medicated.
Yeah.
At this point, like they were literally giving her morphine, which back then they thought was a sedative, because they didn't know common medicine like we do now.
Right.
So I believe she wasn't in the right state of mind while these trials were happening, and I think that maybe helped her in a sense.
I think so.
But she also never was hysterical until those moments.
After the trial, the Borden sisters, Lizzie and Emma, actually moved into a large modern house in the Hill neighborhood. So, that neighborhood that they sought after.
Yeah,
that they
the
wanted
rich
to live in.
neighborhood. You know, the houses on top of the hill that they envied to want to be in.
Exactly. So they lived in Fall River still.
Yeah.
So around this time, Lizzie began using the name Elizabeth A. Borden.
Yep.
Because, Lizzie was just...
Well, she was haunted by her past actions. I mean, she literally was
Exactly.
like the most hated woman in the community.
Exactly. So at their new home, which Elizabeth dubbed Maplecroft, they had a staff that included live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman. Because Abby was ruled to have died before Andrew, her estate went first to Andrew and then, at his death, passed to his daughters as part of his estate. A considerable settlement, however, was paid to settle claims by Abby's family. And furthermore, even though she was acquitted, Lizzie was ostracized by the Fall River Society and
Rightly
community
so.
there. Like you said, rightly so. It's
Yep.
just you can't ever get back what you once had before going through a trial like this. And then in 1905, shortly after an argument over a party that Elizabeth had given for actress Nancy O'Neill, Emma moved out of the house and she never saw her sister again.
Yeah, they instantly separated. She said, I don't want anything to do with you. You're bringing down my morale like this. Never to this day will we know what that argument was. I remember they had interviewed Emma asking her.
Yeah.
And she would never give up the reason why they separated and stuff like that. They were very, very hush. Sorry. They were very hush about literally everything after all the murders. Lizzie was ill in her last year following the removal of her gallbladder. She died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927 in Fall River at age of 66. At this point, she got her own place, and she was literally living, like, on her own by herself. I believe she had a lot of animals.
I think so. Because like we said before, like at the beginning, she was very much like animal oriented.
Yeah, I believe she had like cats and dogs, or maybe just cats.
I'm not sure.
We'll fact check that one. Funeral details were not published and few attended. 9 days later, Emma died from chronic nephritis in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire, having moved to this location in 1923 both for health reasons and to avoid renewed attention following the publication of another book about the murders. They were buried side by side in the family plot in Oak Grove Cemetery.
So, for those of you that don't know what chronic nephritis is, it is kidney inflammation. And obviously, that can be very damaging.
Yeah.
But, yes, that is what it is.
She became really popular.
Yes.
And not the best ways, obviously. She kind of became like almost a town folklore. So we love the movie Aristocats, and our favorite part is when the old man, I can't remember his name.
I don't know his name.
He comes to the house and he's singing ta-ra-ra boom diye, ta-ra-ra
because he's like driving it,
diye.
like the car like backfires. It's old, and whoop.
Oh yeah, and he falls on his cane. Whoop. And we just read this, and it just said that because it became her thing became kind of a folk rhyme. Obviously, they exaggerated how many stabs there were.
Yeah,
and stuff like that because they made it rhyme. But they said that it was sung to the tune of the popular song "Ta Ra Ra Boom Die," which is from the movie, and we absolutely quote that movie all the time. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. That's how it's usually said. So how is it sung in that sense? Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. So this became a folk rhyme. It actually became really creepy in a lot of things. That people would like say it and think that Lizzie would come and get mad at them for saying it because it was almost like mocking her.
Yeah, but the kids would sing this while like skipping rope.
Yeah.
So.
And then apparently the rhyme has a less well-known second verse. Andrew Borden now is dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing. On the gallows she will swing.
That gave me chills when you read that. Damn.
Even though that's not how she died. But.
So the folklore says that the rhyme was made up by an anonymous writer as a tune to sell newspapers. Others attribute it to the ubiquitous but anonymous Mother Goose. In reality, Lizzie's stepmother suffered 18 or 19 blows. Her father suffered 11 blows.
That is the case of Lizzie Borden.
Yes.
Pretty creepy. You can actually still go to her house. People investigate there all the time, thinking that they're going to get the answers of who actually killed Abby and Andrew, which, like, never gonna happen.
No.
Unfortunately, ghosts don't just spill their secrets even in death.
She took it to the grave.
They all did.
Yeah.
Which is pretty unfortunate, actually. Because obviously, who wouldn't want to know who did this?
Exactly.
I think it was either Lizzie Borden herself. It was all orchestrated. I kind of leaning more towards kind of almost all orchestrated, if not orchestrated, but like hush hush. Like, okay, you do this. I'm not gonna say a word, especially with Maggie.
Yeah.
In the house. She never got treated by them well, so
No.
she had nothing to lose from them besides like a job. Like, I understand why maybe she wouldn't.
Yeah.
But she also had, I guess, not the greatest relationship with them, so like she really didn't care if they were dead or alive, I guess.
She was just a help to them.
I definitely don't think it was a random.
No.
So.
But don't forget to like and subscribe. And follow us on TikTok, because that is our main account, and you will get to see all of our funny bloopers, behind the scenes, things like that.
This will be out on Spotify when this video comes up.
Yes.
Don't forget to check out all of our old videos that we have up on YouTube, Spotify, whatever platform works for you. If you we have some funny videos, we have some more serial killer ones. If there's any other serial killers you want us to do, or any cases, leave them in the comments. If there's any cases that you find is really interesting that we that you think we'd like to do, feel free to leave that down below. So
stay safe, stay happy, and we'll see you next time.
Deuces.
Oh.
Ow. That was a pretty good one. I'm struggling.
I know.
I'm struggling.